You're listening to the Kennel Confidential podcast, brought to you by the United Tree and Feist Association. I'm your host, Davin Ramage.
I'm your co-host, Chad Webster.
Let's get into the episode.
And long story short, I talked to one of the local guys there as we were getting ready to leave. We thought we'd go down and buy maybe a couple souvenirs and at least bring something back. And he told me, he said, next time you come out there, he said, the summer before, get you some of them big goats and walk around with grain in your hand and have them follow you around the yard once a day. And he said, when you get your elk, that you take them with you and you take the packs and you put them on them dudes and they'll follow you out carrying that elk meat.
Huh.
And I said, what do you do with them after we get there? And he said, just turn them loose. The locals will adopt them, and it's not like they're going to go off and make a new herd of, goats in the wilderness. I thought it was a pretty good idea, but then I'm thinking, how do I get them to Colorado?
Well, the problem with that today is, have you priced goats lately? I'm not turning them loose.
Hannah's the goats, not me.
I've got goats.
I'm doing goats.
I'm not hauling them anywhere. They stink. So.
Put them 9 grandkids on them and let each one ride one out to Colorado.
When they come to my house, they're in the goat pen. So
He always brags about them peeing on their own face. I don't know where that.
Just the male.
Yeah, I've always heard not to touch a billy goat's beard.
No, don't do it.
No. You'll stink for 2 or 3 days. It's got to wear off.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty nasty.
So where do you all live at? Up near Winchester?
Hannah?
I wasn't sure who should go first. I'm actually in Harrison County, up in Cynthiana.
Yeah, I'm over in Anderson County, which is Lawrenceburg, just south of Frankfort.
Well, I guess I've held everybody up talking. We better get going.
I thought we was almost done.
Well, it is Kennel Confidential podcast. We had so much good hunting talk going there, we're actually already rolling. So we know a little bit about who you are, but the listeners hadn't heard you introduce yourselves yet, so we will give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves. We are it's a father-daughter duo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are going to talk to us a little bit about the Kentucky Houndsman Association and Houndsman Associations in general. So I'm going to step back for a minute and give you all an opportunity to introduce yourselves.
Well, my name is Doug Johnson. I'm the president of the Kentucky Houndsman Association. Been the president for, I believe, 5 years. Been on the board for many years. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure when I got on the board, but it's been at least 15 years based on talking to some people and you all mentioned Steve DeVary, and Steve was on the board for a while, and he and I compared some notes about when I got on the board and where that took place at. So we put together a timeline. So it's been at least 15 years for me being on the board. The year that I became president, Hannah, my daughter, who you'll hear from just a second, was present at the banquet, which is where we elect members and put people on the board. And so kind of asked her to jump on board. She has some, I'll brag on her just a minute. I know that's probably not what everybody wants to hear, but
we'll take it.
She's one of the more highly educated women that I've ever known in my life. She's got a associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree. She's been a professor at a college up in Cincinnati where she taught, I think, an economics class. Is that correct, Kate?
Yep. Yes.
And so I don't want to take the wind out of her sails, but so I needed somebody to manage the money, and little did I know she was going to jump on board and become our secretary and treasurer, and has done an excellent job with that, managing our accounts. And she's a person that I can, like Steve mentioned prior to, Steve was the vice president that got off the board last year, a sounding board for me. And it's comforting to know there's somebody that I can just call up within a minute or text and say, hey, how much money do we have in this account? And within a few minutes, no matter what she's into, I'll get an answer. So I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then you all can fire some questions back at us about the Kentucky Houndsman Association.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Chapman, and my stuff's pretty much been covered. I think I'm the secretary and treasurer. I joined the board in 2019. So,
Are you still professing?
no, the college actually, it was a small university that was opened in the 1800s, and COVID shut it down completely. They lost 50% of their students during COVID, and they just couldn't recover from it.
Dang, it sucks. A college that old too.
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, and it has a really, really cool history. It was actually carved out of the woods by a group of nuns.
Wow.
And yeah, very cool story. But yeah, so anyhow, COVID unfortunately shut it down. So I haven't pursued teaching since that, but I taught for 6 years in the business department. My master's is a business administration, and I was the business coordinator at the school for 2 years.
Well, all these questions, I'm just going to toss them up, and whoever wants to answer them, just grab them and go with it. So I guess the first question would be, what would the mission of the Kentucky Houndsman Association be?
Well, we have a mission statement, and we do have a website where you can read that. But to abbreviate that, it's to ensure that hound hunting in the state of Kentucky has a future.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole lot more to just that. So you all done a little background on the Kentucky Houndsman Association. So we are a watchdog group for legislation that might affect our rights and ability to free cast hounds. We work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to ensure that what the regulations that they, put on us don't conflict with what we want to do and how we want to do it. And we have a great working relationship with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, and very much appreciated the welcome. The door is always open up there. They're welcoming to our association, and in fact, I said numerous times that we are one of their most appreciated partners in recent years. So it's a work in progress, and it's something that didn't come by easily. We had to work to get our foot in the door and stay in the door. And, a lot of that comes from the leadership that I'm following up with. And I appreciate the people who made that way possible, before I came along. Doug Morgan, the past president, had a great working relationship. He also retired when I became president to pursue the 8th District Commission seat up there, and got it, and just retired last, I'm going to say 2 years ago. No, I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. I think he came off the board last December. Legislation regulations for the board has changed a little bit, so it's a little confusing. There was a guideline at one time when your term was up, you were off. That legislation has been changed a little bit and tweaked to make sure that we have a seating commission throughout the voting process and the commission meetings throughout the year. So Doug's term had expired, but he stayed on until, I believe, the December commission meeting last year in 2023 was his last date there.
I guess another question that I would have on that, and not to put you on the spot or anything, but I know it's Kentucky Houndsman Association, but do you cover all types of dog hunting? I mean, we're in squirrel hunting, but we don't hunt hounds.
Right. Well, let me say it like this. So my primary goal is to ensure that we have a right to free cast hounds in the state of Kentucky. And for me personally, that includes bird dogs, beagles, foxhounds, Labradors, pointers, squirrel dogs of all varieties, curs and feis. And I feel that part of my duty along with that is to make sure that your grandmothers and your granddaughters or grandsons have a right to keep and own a puppy or a dog or a cat or whatever they feel like they want to have as a pet in the way that they want to keep that animal. So I'm a firm believer in animal husbandry, and we support good animal husbandry across the state. We do not support animal rights. And you all know the definition of that, and if you want me to go into that deeper, I can, but that's kind of who we're up against, the animal rights group. So I want to make sure that everybody who wants a dog in the state of Kentucky, who keeps it ethically, who keeps it healthy, who does the right thing by those dogs, have a right to keep those dogs and do with them as they may. I'm not for dog fighting, and I'm not for those kind of things, and no group should be for dog torture or any type like that. But if you want to breed some dogs in your backyard, we're going to support that. We're going to fight bad legislation that may restrict you from doing that. And if you want to hunt bears with a hound, then I'm going to support that. I'm going to do that and be involved with that the best way I can to make sure legislators know that we're fighting that fight and we're not going to give up that fight. So hopefully that answered the question.
Oh yeah, yeah. How old how old or how long has the Kentucky Houndsman Association been around?
It was formed in 1987. There was a large group of guys that got involved, and how I understand it, and I was a baby back in 1987, believe it or not, but how I understand it was that there was some legislation or some regulation changes that would have affected free casting a hound. And so a group of guys got together, formed the Kentucky Houndsmen, went to the Department of Fish and Wildlife and said, we're not going to have any of this. And also went on to Frankfurt. They stopped that regulation or bill that was trying to get passed to restrict our hound hunting. So we've been around quite a while. We are a 501c3, and so we are a nonprofit. We have no interest or no desire to close our doors and walk away from this. And I'm saying that because we need new people to step up from time to time to pursue these goals. We've had a great group of people throughout the years that have worked with legislators, built relationships. I've got a relationship with my senator here in Anderson County, Adrienne Southworth. She got voted out. Her term expires in January, but she helped us with several bills, promoting some bills, and also stepping up and help stopping some bills that were bad for us. So building relationship with those legislators and people who represent us is a major role in this, and we need some people who are interested in that to come step in and fill these slots that are going to come up. So if somebody out there is listening to this podcast and interested in getting involved with the Houndsman and doing what we do, feel free to reach out to any of our directors. We have 12 directors on the board, or Han and I, and we'll have a conversation about it.
Yeah, so I pulled your history up here just as soon as you said that. Should have had it in front of me already. But right off the bat, I'm a huge fan because apparently in 1990, you defended the 22 rifle. So as a squirrel hunter, I will buy you a steak dinner for that.
Buddy, I'm with you right there. I have no clue what that history was. So that's all. And I did not know that. I know that since I've been on the board, we were heavily involved with the nighttime coyote regulation that opened up, the use of lights at night, thermals, and those kind of things. We were involved heavily with the running of turning hounds loose for bear when that became available to us. And so we advocated for that through Fish and Wildlife. So there's been several things. Most recently, I have been working with Fish and Wildlife on the fox pen regulation. So a lot of people don't know this, but there's a bunch of fox training pens or fox running pens across the state of Kentucky. Some of them are commercial pens where we hold some commercial events. These guys feel it's a little bit safer turning their hounds loose in a pen. And so through, I guess, a federal bill that pertained to rabies in 2018, there was a call to shut down captive wildlife. And so Fish and Wildlife put that into play last in 2023 in March. And so they were declining giving these pens wildlife permit. And I'm using my words cautiously, so I don't want to confuse anybody and say something that's incorrect. So what that essentially would have done would shut down all the coyote pens, the fox pens. So what's legal in Kentucky is coyotes and red foxes. You're not allowed to put a gray fox in a pen. So there are rabbit running pens, coon hound training enclosures, squirrel hound training enclosures, beagle enclosures, so forth. So we went through the whole process of dissecting the regulation and rewrote the regulation with a couple of my board members, a couple of pen owners, and the couple of the folks at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Laura Palmer, our fur-bearing biologist, and a couple other folks sat in on that. Gabe Jenkins, who is the co-deputy commissioner, was involved also, and I know Gabe on a personal level. So we rewrote that reg, got the pens to stay open. Now that reg has not been submitted through legislation yet. It's being, how do I want to say, proofread basically before it's submitted, and that goes into law. And that's what we've been working on the last, I'm going to say, a little over a year actually. And by the time I got that wrapped up, they started opening the regulation for the beagle pens. So I'm working on that with Fish and Wildlife right now. Not that I'm doing anything special, but I have the membership through the association, and I know some of these guys, so I'm connecting them with Fish and Wildlife, and we're putting together. They want our input. They want to help us. They want to keep the pens open. They're not trying to shut us down. Everybody wants to say, oh, it's all about the money. It's really not. It's about protecting our heritage as hound hunters. And they understand that, and they appreciate it, and they're working with us to make that happen.
One thing that I guess we should ask you too is, how strong is the Kentucky Houndsman membership?
I keep the membership list as the secretary, and I know we are individual memberships. And when we say individual, that's a family membership. So each person in a family doesn't necessarily have to. So like the Mitchells, I think there's 9 kiddos in that family, 8 or 9. And so, we don't have 10, 11 cards for the Mitchell family. We have 1. But I know we're well over 100 strong, probably much higher than that at last check. And then we also charter clubs. So we have at least 15 charters right now, the last time that I checked. So we're pretty high in numbers, and we've grown from what I can tell since I've been on the board every year.
Well, Justin ought to be a club.
Club, that's for sure. So clarify, if you live within the household, the mom or dad just has to buy the one membership, which is $20 a year. We want kids to participate, and we want to make it easy on the parents to let the kids participate. So let me clarify numbers. We get 1,000 printed off, membership cards printed off every year. So we, before COVID, we were actually renewing that order before the end of the year. So we were selling over 1,000 members.
Wow.
But I think right now we're probably setting it in the neighborhood of 600 memberships right now for this year. Y'all talk about legislation and numbers, and I know you were talking about that with Justin. That's really what the membership is about for us. It's not about taking your money and putting it in a bank account and then scratching our head wondering what we're going to do with it. It's about getting 1,000 members and walking up to Frankfort and saying, look, we don't like this bill you're trying to do, and here's the 1,000 people that says we don't like it that way. Numbers make a huge impact when it comes to legislation. And it makes a huge impact when it comes to our voice with Fish and Wildlife.
So on the topic of legislation, though, it's there was a couple states I had in mind. Colorado is the only one sticking out to me because that's the loudest one right now. But the fight that they're getting ready to have over their hound legislation, when state associations get involved, you're not necessarily hiring lobbyists to do this arguing. I mean, you're letting the houndsmen themselves step in and do the arguing.
I gotta admit, it's mostly me. And so when the legislative session starts here in Kentucky, the first week of January, I turn the computer on, get my coffee going, and watch what's happening. If I see something that's going to pop up that looks like we need to get involved with, I start sending emails out, making phone calls to legislators mostly. We've got some great people within the Senate that represent sportsmen and houndsmen. I'll mention Robin Webb. She's been an advocate for the houndsmen for a lot of years, and there are a few more. But it is advantageous for us to have, people's cell phone numbers where we can get a hold of folks real quick. And so I watch that throughout the session. And if we need people to send emails, I start reaching out to some of these charter clubs and sending emails and making phone calls and get support from some of our members. Usually it's to the directors first. And we, like I said, we have a 12 board director, and then some of their friends and contacts and so forth. Here's the thing about legislation. You all may know this, but I want to say this to people who are listening. If somebody wants to get a bill shut down that's really good and they hate the idea of it, they just tack something on. It just takes one sentence to say you can't do this with, some weird oddball thing while you're chewing gum and walking down the sidewalk. And so the bill doesn't pass because of that one liner that they threw in there. And some of them do pass, and they've got those one-liners, and then we're like, what do we do now with our chewing gum?
Yeah, how do you enforce all the people chewing gum?
Yeah, those piggybacks ought to be against the law anyway. I think that just defeats the purpose of what they're doing.
Sure. So I want to bring up this torture bill. The torture bill was specifically designed for torturing dogs and cats, and they have been trying to get this right for about 5 years. And they've been working with representatives and senators, and there's a group that had the legislators write this bill, and then they would hear from me. Basically, they would give me the bill or let me look at the bill, and I got involved. And so throughout the last 5 years, they were sending the bill once it was written to me and saying, what do you think about this? And so it's been submitted, and I fought it, and I fought it, and I fought it. So they got to the point this year it passed. Nearly 100% of them, the senators, supported that bill. It was something that wouldn't affect what we do. There were certain areas in that bill that said whatever is allowable through Fish and Wildlife as far as hunting dogs and training methods and so forth, that this wouldn't affect that. They essentially called me and said, look, we know you're not going to advocate for this bill or support this bill, but could you please not come out against this bill? At this point, they had the wording where I thought we were safe. And since that bill has passed, and I couldn't have fought it with as much support they had from the Senate across the board, even if I brought all of our members to Frankfort. So nothing in that bill is going to affect us. So this bill, I want to clarify, this torture bill says it's a felony to set a dog on fire. It's a felony to impale a dog. It's a felony to electrocute a dog with 120 or 220 volts with the intent that you're going to maim that dog and cripple or kill it. So the people who say, well, that's bad for coon hunters, if you're doing that to your dog, then shame on you. You don't have any right to be a coon hunter, or I don't want to associate with you.
Is it the collars is that where they were afraid maybe that it would affect?
Well, yes. And so the previous bills had, they didn't say shocking a dog, but they had electrocuting a dog. They had beating a dog. And so the definition of that wasn't very clear. So I said, I can't support that. Look, if my dog is barking, we're going to put a shock collar on that dog so I don't annoy the neighbors. If a dog gets into a fight with a puppy, I'm going to smack it on the nose and say, hey, look, that's not how we treat each other around here. So is that beating a dog because I struck it? That had to be defined. And what was the intent of those actions? I want to tell you that I did not interject or give any advice to those bills. I let them run their course, but I would not support those bills in the way they were written. They were too vague. Part of the bill that passed said that modern training methods with electronic collars and so forth were totally acceptable and understandable. So that was part of the Fish and Wildlife section of that, and training dogs and dogs that are seeing eye dogs and so forth. It applies to all those dogs. And so that had to be defined, and that's what they did with this bill. There's still some stuff in that bill that's too vague, that will never be able to convict a person for a Class D felony, which is what that is. And I'm okay with that. I think what I started with this conversation was to tell you all that since the houndsmen have been formed, there's been no animal rights bills that's been passed in the state of Kentucky.
So this might be a little tricky. Recent disasters across Southeast, all the tornadoes and hurricanes and all that. Does the state association have an emergency fund or do any fundraising for stuff like that?
We do not have that. And one of the things I've talked about in the last couple of years is we need a legal fund set aside for an attorney retainer to represent some of these guys who get their dog shot. We typically have a dog or two shot every year in the state of Kentucky. Sometimes our organization hears about it. Sometimes we hear about it, months later. If we hear about it, we try to get involved. If we're contacted, we're not trying to butt into anybody's business. And some guys have the funds to represent themselves. And I still want to talk to them and help in any way we can. I do want to say this. So if you get a dog shot in the state of Kentucky, the first phone call should be to the Kentucky State Police.
I thought it'd be the 811.
Yeah.
Call before you dig.
Before you dig. So I 100% understand what you're saying. I don't know that I take time to dig, but so I want Hannah to get involved with this part. I'm gonna say 3 years ago we had the youth. So we had the Youth UKC Nationals, which is a youth coonhound event in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, hosted by the Coon Club there. We, as a board, voted to support that because it was a youth event in our state. We have the association, and we also have the foundation. And the foundation is strictly funds for youth events that we gain those funds through special commission permit sale raffle for the elk tag, and we actually do a auction, a blind auction for the deer permit. And so there's two different bank accounts set up for two different purposes. But as soon as we heard about the disaster that took place, we wanted to get involved. So at the Youth Nationals, I met a man named Jamie Estep, who is a UKC United Kennel Club rep. And so Jamie, great guy, but he set up a donation thing with another church. He knew a pastor in North Carolina, and he put a post on Facebook. And so we have a Facebook group just for our directors. And so I polled those folks. They all got back the same day and said, yes, let's make a donation. So as I spoke earlier, we've done really good with funds, and I want to get Hannah in this, but I'm going to take the wind out of her sail too on this conversation. Hannah, you can talk about the money part of it. All of them said, yes, let's do something quickly. So Hannah, you want to talk about the process of how that handled?
Yeah, we just we all agreed on the same amount, and we PayPal'd it over to Jamie that day. And I believe he even posted on Facebook and the amount of money that they were able to raise from various coonhound and hunting organizations. And I believe they trucked the supplies down to the Carolinas. So yeah, pretty much as simple as that, really.
But any kind of help at all, sending groceries, like I said, that was really cool to see. But I think a lot of people do want to, it's easy to jump to money, but what people need immediately are goods, so that's
Right.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, they were buying the goods and putting them on. I think he had 2 tractor trailers taking the stuff down, and we were happy to help a little bit what we could.
Now, you probably haven't had much interest, but have you ever thought about doing, I know you do coonhound events and fox events and stuff like that, but have you ever thought about doing a squirrel event?
Yes. And so we would love to have some people get on the board that are more knowledgeable with the squirrel dogs than we are, the board members that currently exist. And some of us, I cut my teeth on squirrel dogs back when I was a kid over in McGoffin County. Everybody had a squirrel dog. There were coon dogs, but there were no coons in McGoffin County back in the mid-'70s. And I took my first coon hunt. I lived in Syersville. My first coon hunt was in Pike County because somebody seen a coon track on one of the strip mines. And so that's truly how excited we were. We drove 2 counties down to Pike County and turned the dog loose on
one coon.
One coon. And so squirrel dogs were kind of the tree dogs that a lot of kids got their start with. And I got to be honest, they were feist, but there was no breed standard, and they probably were just mutts to that bred behind somebody's barn. But man, I would hear the neighbors' little squirrel dogs tree up on the hill, and I can't tell you how many squirrels and some groundhogs that I shot out to them, with just a little 22 rifle. So, Hannah, you want to jump in here and talk about the jackets and how much we do for that, who we give jackets for the youth, or?
Hannah did mention in her email, and I was going to tap on her for that since she's the bean counter. But yeah, you did mention in your email, kind of leading up to the podcast, just what y'all do for the youth and that sort of thing. So yeah, Hannah, definitely fill us in on that.
So we have our youth championship coon hunt every year. So winner of the show gets a $500 scholarship. The hunt is split into age groups. So we have, I believe it's 5 to 12, if I'm not mistaken, and then 13 to 17. And each one, the high scorer in those gets a $500 scholarship. We have a youth beagler of the year that also gets a scholarship. And then we have our Coonhound Championship Series. So there's a hunt representative in that as well as a show representative. So all in, for every year we give out $3,000 in scholarships, and I keep a record of those. And when the kids graduate, they will get a hold of us and let us know what their plans are, if they're going to go to college, if they're going to go to trade school, if they're going to become a farrier, whatever it is that they've decided to do to kind of further their career or education. They get a hold of us, and then we distribute their funds that they have earned over time. And we've got kiddos that are building up a little chunk for themselves that, they come back every year and win. And so I just keep a record of that. And then we're able to, write them a check when that time comes. And they get their jackets. I'm trying to think. I believe everybody that gets a scholarship, everyone I just mentioned, the winners of the championship series as well as the state championship hunt and show, all get jackets.
Then we also, PKC Coonhound Youth Nationals is held out in the West Kentucky Coon Club there outside of Paducah. And as long as it's held within the Kentucky, within the borders of the Kentucky state, we're going to support the youth. And so we do a jacket for the winner of that event as well. Steve DeVary was involved with that. You all may know Ryan Buchanan. He was on the board. He's a member of that club. And so they got us involved with that when they started holding that event there. And I think Ryan's club was kind of instrumental in getting that back to Kentucky, and we're happy to support that. So we're kind of hands off with that whole thing. We just have somebody call us with the winner's name and address, and I call them and say, what size do you need and what do you want on your jacket? And we make that up and send it out to them. And glad to be a part of that, honor the kids. And we just want to encourage kids to participate in the sport. So that's really what our involvement is. So if we don't involve a kid 20 years from now, that means nothing. We've got to support the kids, encourage the kids, take them along. Somebody took us hunting. Even bringing the neighbor kid. If you don't have kids, bring the neighbor kid out.
So what's the youth conservation camp that you had mentioned?
Anna?
So every year, for the past 12 years, we have been, the commission has, I guess, awarded us, I don't know if that's the correct word or not, a bull elk tag for Kentucky. And so we raffle that off, and every year, I shouldn't say every year, but in the past, it was done a little bit differently. Over the past couple years that I have kind of ran that, we have sold tickets for that online, and I go through and manually email everybody back their ticket numbers, and we sell 300 tickets at $60 each. So it's a limited number of people that, can purchase. And so all of the funds that we raise from that go directly back to youth events in the state of Kentucky. So 50% we immediately donate back to Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and they use that money. We have them earmark that for the conservation camps. And then the other 50% is retained by our foundation, and that's where our scholarship funds come from, our donation money for youth events, our youth championship, and so on. So everything from that is sent back to kids in Kentucky.
in addition to the support, the fundraising, the legislation, and all the background work that the Kentucky Houndsman Association does, y'all also put on your own. I mean, y'all, it may not be a year full, I realize, but y'all do have some of your own flagship hunts, or what we always refer to as flagship hunts. Is that correct? Coon hunts, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you had mentioned that you had your championship series for coonhounds, beagles, and foxhounds. Kind of take us, or at least take me through that pace a little. Is there a point system or award system, or what's the end goal by the end of the season?
We have a spring championship usually in May. We have our annual benefit for sportsmen's rights, and that one is usually first or second week of June. It used to be in July. It's kind of moved around a little bit. Last 2 years it's been in June, and that one is held at the Dix River Coon Club. We have our state championship, which we have been hosting at the Clark County Fairgrounds in Winchester the last few years. And then we have the state championship youth event. Same thing. It's at the Winchester Clark County Fairgrounds. And so those are our big coon hunts. The Beagle guys have events every year, and the Foxhound guys do as well.
So we have what we call a championship series, which was created about 7 years ago. We wanted to give our members more than just the coon hunts, the beagle hunts, and the fox hunts that they go to. It's kind of like some of these guys call them a state race. So basically, it's accumulation of points throughout a series of events that we hold. So the beagle guys have their events. I think they have 5 that they award points for this series. They did a invitational hunt last year for the first time. So basically, they were giving out points for each event. So you place here, you place there, you get 10 points or whatever. The Foxhound guys have their own point system. The coon hunts, which I've been more directly involved with, have had 2 different types of point systems, and one was really difficult to track, and it took hours to plug in a bunch of names and numbers, and then so many points per event per your placement. And we just narrowed it down with guys like Steve DeBerry saying, hey, let's simplify this and just give everybody 10 points for each cast win. And so we started that a couple years back, and it's been so much easier. We do have a tiebreaker system where you get 2 points for a Final Four cast, and every youth that enters any of our events gets 2 points just for participating. So that's an accumulative score at the end of the season. So there's 7 hunts totals for the coonhound events. So the winner of that gets a jacket for that, and the youth get the scholarship, as Hannah's already mentioned.
Well, I know that I've learned a lot about the Kentucky Houndsman Association, because just to be frank with you, I figured y'all were there for legislation, being a state and organization. But I really thought y'all were more of a statewide hunting organization. But what I've learned now is that that's probably like the least of y'all's worries. Y'all do a lot more for the houndsman community than you do as far as putting on the hunts, which is really cool. And then, so Hannah, you had mentioned too, and Doug, I don't know, whoever wants to answer this one, the annual membership banquet y'all have that you give out awards, I guess, to your members or houndsmen or youth or whatever. I was kind of curious just what some of those awards look like. Is it the biggest coon, smallest coon award, or is it sportsmanship awards? What are you awarding your members with?
I do about anywhere from 12 to 20 jackets for the banquet. And that's the majority of those prizes. The scholarships and certificates and those kind of things have already been awarded for the most part at some of those events. When we're in direct contact with the kids, we give those out. The kids that aren't in direct contact with, we try to do those at the banquet. We've conserved some money. We're putting that back into some of the prizes that we give. And we think the jackets are more appreciated than a trophy. So we try to lean toward that a little bit. And so this year we have voted to do an invitational hunt instead of just awarding the guy with the most cast wins. We're going to invite 16 dogs to compete in an invitational hunt to be crowned the championship series winner for the coon dogs. So the Beagle guys did that last year. They had, I want to say there were 64 dogs qualified. They had 30 something show up to the invitational. They did an elimination style hunt one morning out at Peabody, and really was a good event. They got cash money for the top 4 dogs in the last cast, and everybody loved it.
Now, where is the banquet held?
The last 2 or 3 years, it's been at the Clark County Fairgrounds. The Clark County Fairground was very good to us the first year and let us rent the fairgrounds for our youth event free of charge. And so they've been good to us. They tweaked the numbers a little bit to give us a discount if we have multiple events. And I got to tell you, our state hunt, that was the last weekend in September, had multiple people come up and said, this is the best move the houndsman made in a long time. So most of our members are in Eastern Kentucky. And we've got members across the state, but the majority of them are there within an hour or 2 driving of Winchester, and the hunting there is pretty good. So we don't go to the mountains. And so it's a good location. We've got a lot of support. A lot of the local guys come support the kids groups as well, the kids youth hunt. And we're looking for bigger and better things out of there.
All right. Well, I think it's about time for my favorite part of the show. And I'm going to pick on Hannah a little bit. So I try to get a funny story out of people on every podcast. And we've heard a couple on you. Maybe you want to get even? You want to tell one on old Dad, or?
Oh man, see, this is the question I should have been given prep for. I am drawing a blank. I have no funny stories right now.
Doug, this gives you a chance to get another foot up.
Uh-oh.
The funniest one was leaving her lay in the woods when she was 5 years old. Actually,
and I've clearly blocked that out. So,
did y'all grow up with your dad in the woods chasing coon dogs or rabbit dogs, or he's mentioned that he's a squirrel hunter?
Yeah, no, we had coonhounds since well before I was born. So it's been there my whole life. And it's funny because somebody actually kind of asked me recently when I started hunting, and I don't have an answer for that because it's just always been there. And I'm like, I don't remember my first coon hunt. I've just always gone. And it's kind of a funny thing because my mom is a city girl. She grew up on an Air Force base, not really a country girl at all. And she really kind of wanted a girly daughter. And so it's kind of a funny thing because, just as years ago in elementary school, she had put my hair in curlers, and then Dad came in and said, who wants to go hunting? And I went in and pulled all my curlers out and went to the woods with Dad. And Mom will tell that story now. And it's funny, I didn't really realize it till I was an adult. She never stood in the way of it. And, she was just like, okay, she's going to go hunting now, So, yeah, we all have kind of grown up doing it, and it's cool because we've got, the grandkids getting out there, nieces and nephews, going out there and doing it too. And
well, does your mom have a girly girl now? Does she have a granddaughter, or do you have a sister maybe? Did Mom get her wish?
So my brother has 7 kids, so there's 5 girls in there. I'm sure that one of them will be girly. So.
That's pretty good odds.
Yeah.
The good thing about the girly girls that we raise is they can put the camo on pretty quick. Or the
yeah, that's true.
They'll go on a date with you and black your eye for you too if they have to.
Yep.
So.
I've got 2 girls myself, and one of them is actually in karate, which tickles me to death. I hope she stays with it for her life. But yeah, that's what I want. I want her to be able to black an eye.
There you go.
There you go. You got to have that. I call raising women warriors is what I call it.
Hey, I like that. Yeah.
If they can't black your eye, they can shoot your eye out. So,
not a man big enough a bullet won't stop.
Yeah. So real quick story about Hannah. We lived up in Northern Ohio. I got transferred up there with my job. And I think it was the second night she went with us. And so my son, I packed around on my back, for a couple months there before he was able to walk with me coon hunting. I think he was 3.5 years old when I started taking him. Hannah was probably 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. And so we've got dogs turned loose, and we're standing there in the woods, and it's coon season. So up there, it's like mid-November, and we walk maybe 50 or 60 yards, and I turned around and look at my son, and there's no Hannah. And so we start backtracking, and she had made her little nest in the woods and was curled up asleep in a big pile of leaves. So it must have been times, all I can tell you, but that was not one of my stellar nights, just so you know. Even a 5-year-old curled up in a big ball of winter or fall leaves, and not knowing where she was at was not a great feeling when you start backtracking. So that was not funny at all.
When I was running beagles, my sons used to go with me at night, and we would sit on a tailgate and listen to the dogs running. And both of them have curled up in a dog box and slept. So,
oh yeah, that happened. That happened quite a bit. There was plenty of times when she was curled up in the seat. Although they hung in there pretty good with me, but you know, when you're coon hunting, once in a while they get out of pocket, and then you got to go search. And then sometimes if you're not close enough to take them home, they got to tag along. So there's been some sleeping in the cab of the truck for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There, you know, for a lot of years we took coon hunting real serious. We and Hannah and I have been breeding the same line of dogs dating back to when, Hannah, the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Got like fifth or sixth generation standing in her kennel right now that's in heat that will be trying to get bred next week. And they're just dogs that we've appreciated in natural early starting dogs that we've kept, you know, through the years. And so we've tried to concentrate on things that please us. We're not much on competition hunting, not because we don't appreciate the competition field and what that all entails, but we would rather go out as a family or a group of friends and just have a good time coon hunting. And that doesn't mean we have slacker dogs. We just we like what we like, and I got to be honest, the style of dogs that I hear about in today's world that win the hunts are not the style of dogs that I grew up with. And although I appreciate all styles of dogs, I like a certain style for myself to pleasure hunt. And so you get to a point where sometimes you get too serious about some things. And I know that my son doesn't hunt as much as he did because probably burned him out as a teenager, because I was the chauffeur and he was the handler. And, you know, there was a lot of truck talks on the way home about what he did wrong and what he could have done different or right, and how bad the dog performed or how well the dog performed. And so at times, I got to be honest, parents, listen up. You can take it too far, and you can push your kids too hard. And with the best of intentions, you can do more harm than good. And so my lesson was learned a little while back when my youngest daughter and my grandson, we were out coon hunting. The dogs messed up. I got mad. I'm telling them, hey, you know, when that dog comes home, I'm going to put it up for sale. And I don't even know what the whole scenario was. But as I was getting ready the next night to go, I noticed there was no kids that were eager to get loaded up in the buggy and go coon hunting. And so that trend continued. And I said, what's going on? It's like, Dad, you get mad at the dogs. So my daughter kind of quit on me. Of course, she's in 9th grade now, so it's hair's a nail for her right now. and so my grandson, you know, he was hanging in there a little while longer because he likes shooting a coon out when it's coon season. And he said, you know, I don't really want to go because you get mad at the dogs all the time. And it's like, I'll make you a deal. We'll go and we'll just have fun. And I don't care if we play in the creek and catch crawdads, or, you know, try to catch a minnow with your hunting cap, or take your boots off and wade in the creek, or we go tree a possum, or whatever the case may be. We're just going to have fun. We're going to go out and enjoy nature, hang out. If the dogs do great, we're going to pat them on the head and go back to the house and have a good night's sleep, and what I call a coon hunter's breakfast, which is biscuits and gravy, which he lives for.
Me too.
And if it's not a good night, we're going to have fun doing something else. But we're going to have fun no matter what it is. And that's the biggest thing. So I got to tell you this quick story. This may be the funny part, and Anna can add to it if she would like. So when my older kids were in high school, my son and Hannah, they're 3 years apart. They were both in FFA. And they finished high school up in Clinton County, Ohio. Again, that was where we lived because of my job. And during their time in FFA class, they used the coonhounds as their specialty animal. So a lot of kids were breeding, using cows and that. They raised hogs too for the fair, but we also did specialty animals, our coonhounds, and they kept track of all the nights they hunted and so forth. And at one point, my son came to me and said, "Hey, we got an idea. We got people asking us about our dogs and about coon hunting, and a lot of these kids who are farm kids had never been hunting before, any type of hunting. So with the permission of the school and the FFA director, they put up a sign-up sheet. And the first sign-up sheet was for Tuesday night. We did Tuesdays and Thursday night during coon hunting season, but we were not allowed to take a gun because that was one of the rules the school applied. And so we had Hannah, maybe 3 or 4 kids go
per group. Yeah.
We had these kids meet us at the McDonald's there locally, and we took them to woods and turned the dogs loose. And I got to be honest, it started out as a coon hunt, and a wrestling match broke out, and the girls were way worse than the boys. You talk about a bunch of plowed up cornfields, man. The fur was flying, and we really enjoyed it. So that started out as being like 4 nights. We were doing Tuesday and Thursday for 2 weeks. And at the end of that, the next Tuesday, kids were saying, "Hey, when do we get the sign-up sheet? Where's the sheet at? My dad wants to go." And it was like, this continued on, and I really don't recall how many months, but it continued on off and on through the whole coon season. And at one point, we had 5 truckloads and carloads of parents and kids going to the woods with us.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
There were 20 and 30 kids standing out in the middle of a cornfield while we turned our dogs loose to teach them what coon hunting was all about. And so the funny part of that, again, was the girls in FFA class are way rougher than the boys. But careful, once they get tripped, and man, it was just an all-out brawl. There'd be 3 of them on the ground just rolling around. And we had to break them up. Now it was all in fun, of course, but we had a blast, and I cannot tell you how much that touched my heart. I had a kid jump in the truck one day, pulled up next to me, and I had a single cab pickup truck at the time. He slid over next to me. We were doing like 4 in the front seat, and he said, "I wish you was my dad."
Oh man.
And he was the one kid who didn't have a dad in his life and his presence.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a single mom. And so, man, I got to tell you, you don't forget those comments. You carry them with you your whole life. And so I would encourage anybody to find a kid who wants to go. There's kids out there all over the place. Just ask them and take them to the woods. And, put your heart into that. If you're listening to this podcast, somebody took you hunting, and return the favor.
Well, did we miss anything? Is there a plug or anything for the association or anything that y'all would like to add?
I just want to say we have an awesome board, and everybody works really hard, and our spouses are awesome.
It does take good spouses in this.
Yeah, I mean, my husband and my stepmom, they have been everything. And Ricky and Dakota, they're a grandfather-granddaughter duo that's on the board. And their family is always present every time. Earl's wife has come in and worked the kitchen. Just everybody steps up. And I've joked the last couple of years, Dakota's fiance, I said, man, these houndsman husbands, because she'll be texting him, I need you to bring this. I need you to bring this. And then I'm texting my husband, did you remember to grab this? So we have a really, really awesome group of people.
I would agree with that. Good group. And again, we need to recruit some more because some of us are getting old. So appreciate you guys calling us and inviting us on the podcast. And
yes.
Hopefully we've encouraged some folks to step up with the youth. We would encourage some people to get more involved. And if we haven't been clear on anything what the Houndsman stands for, we're just fighting for the rights for you all to free cast a dog and own a pet. Mm-hmm. And we'll continue to do that. And we need people to continue that tradition on and to help us preserve our heritage. So thank you again for the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Podcast.
Yeah, lots of good stuff. And like I said, I I learned more about the Kentucky Houndsman Association just by interviewing you. What I thought y'all did and what you actually do was very close, but I think I was putting more weight in one basket than the other. So yeah, very cool. I mean, I think I said it on Justin's Mitchell's episode, but I can't afford to join all the associations, but any association, especially locally or state related, to me, if you've got to join. If you want to keep doing what we're doing, you've got to join. And for reasons exactly like y'all discussed in the episode, is just to have somebody in your state capital or country capital in Washington, D.C., however far it's got to go, just have somebody to stand up there and argue for you. So, yeah, we definitely appreciate the time that y'all volunteer and put into protecting that for us.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
yes, thank y'all.
you.
Yeah, we appreciate it too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.